Hello, everybody. Welcome at the first PUM solar course. I'm Nico Kuiper. You can call me Nick. I'm a mechanical engineer and working for the Dutch government on the field of renewable energy and energy saving. That's also why I'm an expert for PUM in the senior department. And that's also the reason why I'm here today. I like to tell you something about solar energy, the basics of solar energy. So we start with understanding the solar cell, how it generates power, but also understand how a solar module works, how much power it will generate, and also the different weather conditions. The role of and the importance of the electronic controller, and also sunshine as a resource, because all over the world it's a different place and also different radiation and how much energy it will generate. So there is an online database for regional sunshine data, and I'm going to tell you something about it. Okay. Let's start, and we start with how much energy the sun is generating. It's about per square meter, 1000 watts, but it's on this moment it's still impossible to catch it all, and only 50 to 20% is generated in real electric power. So if you have a module of 1 square meter, it will generate about 150 to 200 watts electric power. It's getting better and better every year. It used to be, my solar panels on my roof are 125 watts, they're 20 years old. But on this moment, you have 400 or even 500 watts, not per square meter, but per solar cell. Solar module, sorry. So it's better and better. Next to that, you have a battery control, because the module is connected to the battery, and you need some electric device to protect the battery for overcharge. So the controller is controlling how much energy is coming out of the module and not to overcharge or deep discharge the battery, because if you deep discharge, the battery is going to break. It also makes an efficient power between the module and the battery, and that's very important, because efficient power means that the maximum amount of energy which is coming out of the module you can use. My colleagues are going to tell everything about it in a later lesson, but remember, it's very important. Also, an important thing is that you know that a module doesn't generate alternate current, but always direct current. If you need alternate current, you have to change that in special equipment. I'll tell you about that later. Okay. And it later is now, because after the battery, you can invert the DC load into AC load. And that's why you need an inverter. An inverter does that. It's basically a box with electronics, and it will change battery power. It can be 12 volts, it can be 24 volts, it can be 48 volts into 230 volts, 50 hertz alternate current. And inverters there are many different sorts of inverters. Some are very good. You have little loss per inverter, and they're very reliable, but they're also very much cheap ones and not very good. So it's important to choose the right inverter. And remember, you always lose about a few percent till 10% per inverter on energy. It's converted into heat. That's not what you basically want. Okay. What about if you want to have a standalone PV system? Well, it's very important to calculate everything about a system. If you design a system, you need to know how many devices do I need? How much modules do I need? What kind of charge controller do I need? How big is the battery or more batteries? And the point of starting point is basically how much energy do you need? When do you need it? At night, during the day, more days? What if there is a thunderstorm and you can't generate electric energy? So it's important to calculate and to design a system very precise. This is also the thing that my colleagues are going to tell you about later. It's not too difficult, so don't worry. So where you start is the battery size. And what's also very important, so battery size is how big is the battery, how many batteries do you need, basically for how much energy you need. But it's very wise to include a safety margin, especially if it's important that you need energy, so like cold storage or storage of vaccines, a place that can't be that you really need energy. It's very important to include a buffer. So calculate twice by, for instance, calculate twice the system you need, more batteries, more modules. Coming back to that later. So basically, this is the system. And it all starts with how much radiation there is, how much energy there is, or how much energy there is generated by the sun on the place where you live, like solar irradiance. Okay, I'll tell you about it later. First, we're going to have a look at the solar cell and how it generates power. So what you have is, first you have the solar cell. These are all the small square things you see on the solar module. So a solar module is existing out of solar cells. And then if you place more solar modules in a row, you have the solar array. And the solar array is basically the system that generates power out of the sun. We start with the solar cell. Yeah, you can see it as a building block. You can make a small system, but you also can make a very large system in all existing out of the solar cells. Okay, next sheet. So what happens in a solar cell? You have at about 1000 watts per square meter, I told you already, per square meter, and the solar cell is catching that. And you have to realize that 80 to 90% is lost. The system can't do anything with it. The solar cell is not able to generate that into power, but 50 until 20%, sometimes a little bit more, it generates into electric power. And this is what the solar cell does. That's what you catch and you put it in the battery and you can use it. It's a pity that the efficiency is quite low of the solar cell, but all over the world, very clever guys are trying and girls are trying to improve that, and it's getting a little bit better every year. So maybe in the future we have better systems, but until now we have to do with it, and it's really a good system to generate power. Also, what's important to know is that there's basically no difference between a small cell and a very large cell. They have both the same voltage. So if you have a small cell like this, it generates half a volt. And if you have a large cell like this, it also generates half a volt. So it's the same in the same daylight conditions. What the difference is the current, the amperes. So if you have a small cell like this, you have half a volt, but it's a little bit of current, a small current. If you have the big cell like this, we have a large current. So there is the difference. So basically you can say that a large cell generates more power because the current is higher than the small cell. And it's also proportional to the surface area of the cell. So if the large cell is 10 times bigger than the small cell, the current is also 10 times bigger than the small cell. Weather conditions is also a very important thing, because if there's overcast, it's a cloudy day, the solar cell does generate power, but it's a little bit, it's also, I think, good to know that, of course, the sun is generating power, but it's basically not the sun itself, but it's light. So, and if there is light, even with overcast, then the solar cell does catch a little bit and also generates a little bit of power. But basically, you need full sunlight, of course. So the solar cell is making a large current if there's full sunlight. But very important, if you place a solar system, it must be in full sunlight, not under a tree or on the wrong side of your roof or whatever. Also important is that you also have to calculate with overcast, cloudy days, because if you need the electricity and there's a cloudy day, well, if you don't have a buffer or a large battery, you have a problem because you don't have energy. Something about the difficult word, the characteristics of a solar cell. You have all different solar cells made from different semiconductor materials. What you often see is silicon. It's about half a volt. This is also the system you see a lot in Africa. And of course, the output voltage is independent of sunlight radiation. I told you about half a volt. Next to that, I told you also the current is proportional to the surface area of the cell. So if the cell is 10 times bigger, then the current is also 10 times bigger. So for example, if you have a 100 square centimeter silicon cell, 10 by 10 centimeter, it will give a maximum current of about 2.5 amperes when the radiation is normally 1000 watt per square meter. So 2.5 amperes. And it will produce about 1 watt. So you can say that a solar cell of 10 by 10 centimeter produces about 1 watt. If you have 100 cells, it will produce about 100 watts. Okay. Also important to know is that a solar cell can give an open circuit voltage, POC, and the closed circuit currents, but it cannot do on the same time. So, imagine that the person is running very fast, and who is strong enough to carry heavy loads, but you can't run fast and you can't carry heavy loads on the same time. It's one of the both. And that's also the same with solar cells. A high current means a small voltage. And also if you have a high voltage, you have a small current. So what you need is the maximum of both worlds, like the maximum of current and the maximum of voltage. And you see that we call it the maximum power point at this point. So if you have a voltage of 1.1, you have a high current. If you have a high current, you have very low voltage. And what you need is a system that is about 1.44 voltage, then the current is large. So a larger cell will generate more current. More sunlight will generate more current. And if you look at the curves, it will expand vertically. So it needs more, you have more amperes, but not horizontal. So horizontally. The voltage does not change. It's the same. So on this point, the voltage is about 0.4. And in that case, you have about 2 amperes. And that's what you want. So about the modules who are existing out of the cells. How many cells do you see in this module? Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 60 cells. So if you calculate 60 cells and they are each half a volt, then you have 60 times half a volt is 30 volts per module. So suppose that under local conditions, on the place where you where the system is built, the local conditions of sunshine, the short current, circuit current of one cell is 1.5 ampere. And then you have, of course, 1.5 ampere times 30 volts. Well, it generates 45 watts. Always Ohm's law. So amperes times volts is watts output. Very important to remember. Okay, weather conditions. Yeah. Well, if you have clouds like here in Holland, almost all the time, rain, you have about 200 watts per square meter. The module current is going up when you have more sun. You have 1,000 square meter, 1,000 watt per square meter. That's basically what you want, because if you have 1,000 watt per square meter, the system does have a higher voltage and a higher amperes current. And if you look at the maximum power point, it's this point. So the best of two worlds, the best of the current, the best of the volts, and this is what you need. And that's about what I see is about 18 volts and 3 amperes. Well, you probably know that if you have a solar module, there's this plaquette, and it says what the performance is of the system. And there are a few things that there are important. Of course, how much energy it generates, the maximum peak in optimal conditions, and optimal conditions is 1,000 watt per square meter, the standard test condition, at 25 degrees. And then, in that case, it generates 310 watts. That's not bad. It's better than my modules on my roof. But what's very important is now, because in Africa it can be quite hot, but also in South America and other countries, is that if it is hotter, the panels will generate less power. So if the panel is 80 degrees, and it is possible if you have good sunshine, 25% of the power will disappear. So the better condition is basically 25 degrees, like in the morning, in the evening, in full sunshine, and then you have 310 watts. If you have full sunshine and it's very hot on the panel, you have at about 225 watts. Well, it's quite a difference, but it's also something you have to calculate with. There's of course the risk that you say, okay, it's a good panel, 310 watts. That's so much power, that's what I need. Now, you probably need one more because of the temperature, the influence of the temperature. So, you have to calculate with that, and also the place of the solar module, good recirculation of the air, that is free air on the roof, like that. Well, look at that, please. The electronic controller, you remember the first sheet, you have the solar module, then you have the electronic controller, and then you have the battery. And the electronic controller takes care of the MPPV, the maximum power point. The combination between the high currents, in this case 2.6, and also the amount of volts. This is what the electronic does. It regulates the amperes, it regulates the volts, and it takes care of the maximum power point. So the electronic controller is a very important device to have. So you need also a good one. That's what my colleagues is going to tell you about in later lessons. So if you have not a good electronic controller. Then you see that on this point, like 2.5, 2.6 amperes at 13 volts, this is the amount of energy it generates power. Oh, it's not good because the potential is larger. This is the maximum power point. So if you take this rectangle, that's the amount of energy, so voltage, this one, current, this one, times current is the amount of power. It's not a very good electronic controller. If you take this one, you have lower current, higher voltage, and this rectangle, the output, is larger than this one. So what the electronic controller does, it looks at amperes, it looks at the volts, and it's doing something with it, and it says, okay, this is the amount of energy that's best, and it takes care of it. The electronic controller, very important. Okay, the electronic controller, it has two functions. So if you have a solar module, it generates a lot of power. It goes on and on and on and on. And if the battery capacity is it's full, it's very bad for the battery to fill it with energy. It's the same with discharge, especially lead batteries are not able to cope with that. So if you discharge lead battery until there's no power in it, it will break down. The controller protects against that, against overcharge and deep discharge. Now, this is one very important function of the electronic controller. Also, it regulates the MPPT. I told you about it. The maximum power from module, so that you have maximum power out of the solar module. And so this is important about the electronic controller. It's very easy. Okay. About the solar resource, two definitions. You have the GHI, the global horizontal irradiation, and that's basically the total solar energy received on a unit area of a horizontal surface is the GHI. If you look at the global tilted irradiation, then it looks at not at the horizontal surface, but it looks at the tilted surface. And of course, there is a difference between that. And it's also, if you look at solar resources like websites, etc., then you see the difference between it, and you have to calculate this stuff. So this is globalsolaratlas.info. It's free website. You can look at it. In this case, you see the location of Durban in South Africa, and you can see that the specific photovoltaic power output is about 1500 kilowatt hours. If you look at this location and you go to like a small system for a house with an installed capacity of 1 kilowatt peak, that's about 3 or 4 panels, then it will generate about 1828 kilowatt hours per square meter per year on the global tilted surface. This is what you can see. So you can calculate how much energy you receive with 1 kilowatt peak, and you see what annual average is, and a lot of other details you can see. You can also calculate how much power it will generate with an installed capacity of 2 kilowatt peak or 3 kilowatt peak on this location. Also the location of your house. So it's very good website, and you can use it if you are going to calculate the amount of energy you need. This is the starting point. From this point, you can say, okay, so much power is on the place I live or where my client lives, and you can calculate the amount of panels, the amount of batteries, what kind of electronics you need, etc., etc. This is the starting point, so please use it. Monthly averages, of course, because you calculate with the lowest month. You can see that in on this location that you have at about 170 kilowatt hour per square meter. And in July, it's only 100. Oh no, I see 140 kilowatt hour per square meter. And in July, it's 100. So you calculate with the lowest, not the highest, because then you have a problem in the summer. And also the time of the day, because you can see on the different times of days, like in June, between 12 and 13, with the most amount of power, then it's going down, 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 down until between 17 and 18. It's very, very low. So it's very handy. This global atlas, solaratlas.info. Well, I'm at the end of my first lesson. I think you have some basic information right now where you can start with, but there will follow more lessons where my colleagues are going deeper into the lessons, into the things you have to know. I would say look at the readers. In the readers is everything explained about this lesson, and I hope you enjoyed it. That's very important also for me, and wish you very much success in the future. So, bye-bye.